Thank you, Andrew. Nice to be here.
I read in your notes that growing up, you always wanted to run a hospital, which is not exactly the sort of preferred career choice for many young people growing up. Where did that come from?
Well, to be honest, it was probably only since I was about aged 18 in a trip to India which changed everything for me. I was always going to be a lawyer, I thought, anyway. And I think travelling after high school made me realise that was probably a default choice, and that wasn't really me. In truth, what I know now is that I would have been a terrible lawyer. I'm not a particularly detail-orientated person, and there was travel through India and doing some work with Mother Teresa's Home for the Dying was an absolute eye-opener, as it would be for anyone. But more importantly, it just taught me this subtle lesson about what it is we're here for, and not necessarily what the meaning of life is or anything that deep, but it was a nuanced, I guess, change for me that perhaps law was not the path. And immediately when I came back to start my arts and law conjoint, I dropped the law aspect of it and picked up health science. And look, I've never looked back since. I've had an amazing career, which I've really enjoyed thanks to that change.
And that's a good point, because sometimes, students can be pushed down particular paths because of their academic ability in school and so forth. It's not necessarily a good fit, but service was obviously something very, very central to your kind of personal ethos. How did the connection with Mother Teresa's Home for the Dying come about?
The connection actually came out of an opportunity from my high school, St. Peter's College. I'm very lucky to have that opportunity to go up there to India with some friends. As I've talked to, changed the course of my life. And one of the, I guess, what really was important was that service component for me wasn't really in law. I wasn't smart enough to become a nurse or a doctor. So I thought, well, actually, I still want to be in this healthcare world, and perhaps this commercial and leadership and management side is for me. It's not one that every 18-year-old really thinks about, but it's one that fortunately I was able to pursue through the University of Auckland.
As you mentioned, you initially were going to enroll in law, and then you switched to health sciences with an arts conjoint, and then you actually went on to do an MBA. So you've kind of covered the academic spectrum, but I know it was health science that was your real passion point. What do you remember about that course at university, and what particularly struck you?
Well, I remember there was the Tamaki campus was relatively new, and we had this sort of hybrid setting of Auckland, then Grafton, where medical and Tamaki was as well. And the degree itself was relatively new. It was in its infancy. But the passion of the lecturers who were developing and building that degree up really made for an exciting and quite a broad spectrum learning opportunity, which crossed the traditional sciences and into the health systems. And the conjoint with arts was one I'd recommend for anyone. The broad-based education that you could get from an arts degree was certainly complementary to that health science degree.
And as you were pursuing your studies, did this idea of running a hospital become more cemented in where you saw your future focus being?
Yeah, look, it's weird. I just had a crush on hospitals. I also had a crush on airports as well. Like, they're both fascinating workplaces to me. They're very humanistic in the journey that they take people on. And there's so many touch points from all walks of society in hospitals. We've got some of the hardest working but lowest paid people, and we've got some of the hardest working as well but highest paid people, and about 100 touch points for any, let's say, for you to go through surgery. There's going to be 100+ people that will be involved in your journey, all of them caring, and logistically just a minefield which needs to be navigated successfully for your safe journey through. So it's a fascinating world, and look, I've never been bored, particularly in that I'm not a clinical person.
And what was particularly impressive about your career is you ended up achieving this goal of running a hospital before the age of 30. In fact, I think a few people gave you some sideways glances about your age. What do you remember about that experience?
Yeah, look, I certainly didn't look like the general manager of a hospital. I still can't grow a beard, as you can see, but back then when I was 29, it was even worse. Yeah, look, I had some amazing opportunities to get to that point. Fortunately, enough people knew that I'd sort of proven myself in certain domains, and that I could handle this opportunity. And look, I absolutely loved it. I was at the Auckland Surgical Centre, one of the Southern Cross hospitals, and look, that's a fantastic workplace. We really enjoyed it, had a great team, spent 4 amazing years at the helm there. And I do miss that place, but now I've moved across to Mercy Radiology and a whole different sort of realm in the healthcare space, and really enjoying that as well.
And of course, you're Chief Operating Officer at Mercy Hospital, as well as Director of Strategic Partnerships for Healthcare Holdings, which is the umbrella organisation that owns a number of private hospitals. This places you really at the leading edge of healthcare, particularly technology, where we know healthcare is undergoing a revolution like most other sectors. What are you seeing about the way technology is changing healthcare and will do in the future?
Yeah, good question, Andrew. Technology really is the biggest enabler in healthcare, but it's also the biggest hindrance. What we're seeing is just this hot mess of different systems trying to talk to each other, and making sense of that in heads or tails and connecting it effectively is the biggest challenge for all healthcare sectors. One of the main reasons for my move to Healthcare Holdings is they're very aspirational on this front, particularly in the radiology space, which is tech driven. I mean, we use high technologies to actually acquire images, and then we use the human side of things to actually read them. But increasingly, we're looking at things like clinical AI algorithms. We use robotic process automation already. And we use also customer-facing AI just to try and establish the best what the customer wants, the customer being the patient in this instance, and as well trying to navigate that technical landscape to deliver the best clinical outcome. So it's a critical component of moving forward in healthcare.
Now, one other issue we should mention is you are particularly driven around child poverty. In fact, you chair the Child Poverty Action Group. What are some of your thoughts about an issue that is constantly in the headlines? We seem to be really struggling in this area as a country.
Yeah, look, how long have you got? It is certainly something that look, drive is possibly the wrong word, and that I'm angry is probably the right word. I don't like to bring that into it, but I truly believe we're a small, wealthy nation, so this shouldn't be a conversation that we're having at all. And I think collectively we need to address this issue much more effectively than we have been for many years now. I think we've started the journey. I genuinely believe that the last few years has seen a change, in particular the narrative and that we're discussing this and talking about the solutions to child poverty. And look, it's no easy fix, but we need to consistently drive down an aggressive agenda to actually change this, because it's just unacceptable.
What do you think it's going to take to change? I know that's a difficult question to ask in a short period of time, but what is going to, I guess, change what we're doing at the moment to create a better outcome? Yeah,
well, look, it's not the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. We need to build the fence at the top of the cliff, and they're the poverty drivers, many of which aren't explicitly related to child poverty itself, but things like housing is clearly the biggest driver here. Rheumatic fever is a thing that should not be in New Zealand, but because of the quality of our housing stock and the access and affordability issues that we have for housing, we actually have these poverty-related conditions which just shouldn't exist. So I think the building the fence, again, aggressively at the top, it does take a societal change, so we need to actually build a mandate within the society that we live in to address this more aggressively, because incremental improvements to child poverty will never catch up with those poverty drivers that are driving them. So we actually need step change, and significant step change in this area to achieve real change.
I know in your notes you say that our post-COVID-19 response should be about recovery, but not necessarily a return to normal. What's the normal that needs to change, do you believe?
Yeah, well, look, things weren't perfect before COVID. And I think, like many of the business world are talking at the moment, COVID is a real opportunity to actually change the way, just pivot the way we were doing some things prior. I mean, if you look at the way in healthcare in particular, telehealth was a journey that many healthcare organisations were on. I feel like we've been on it for 10 plus years. We've been talking about it, and we've been, edging towards some efficient telehealth systems. Then when COVID happened, we just turned telehealth on. At the Auckland District Health Board, that we just pivoted immediately overnight, and were able to, because of that sense of urgency, actually turn it on effectively and efficiently. And I think so that change which was required of us, we should not take our foot off the pedal in that sense, and a revert to normal, which wasn't working for everyone, particularly in the healthcare space. I don't think should be the default here. We should look for a progressive recovery in which we pick up on in a more effective way those things that we weren't dealing to.
Finally, Michael, what's on the agenda for the future?
It's a tough question. I'm not really sure. I'm absolutely loving what I'm doing now across the private and the public healthcare spaces, and I suppose the biggest driver for me is I'd like to be involved in both in a personal and a professional capacity, things that are driving equity in a meaningful and actually delivering results. Because talking about equity is something we've done for too long, addressing some of the discrepancies in statistics between our Maori and Pasifika families, that I just think it's time to actually see some meaningful change in these spaces. I'm involved in some action that's spearheading that, but if we can't deliver the results, then I'll be looking to the next thing that really can.
Great. Michael, thank you so much for joining us as part of this 40 Under 40 video series.
Thanks, Andrew. It's been great. Cheers.